with that match with you and Steve at WrestleMania 13, there's kind of a double turn in the match, and then you officially turn heel the next night. How far back going into the match was the double turn planned?
It was all done the day before, like the day of the match. We knew, Steve knew, and I knew that we were switching places. Now it's like, so how are we going to do that? And I don't know. Vince never had, nobody else contributed to that. It wasn't like Vince was there giving me ideas, and Steve had all kinds of ideas, and it was me sitting there telling Steve what we were going to do. And I compared it to a school fight. I remember me and Steve just kind of staring at each other blank, like we didn't have anything on the page, nothing, like zero. And then we kind of just started. I said, this is what I think. I said, I see it starting like a school fight. And I remembered a school fight that I had when I was a kid, like not I had, but that I watched as a kid, where these two guys had a fight at school. And one guy was a big, kind of big guy. They're both big guys. Two of the toughest guys in my school at that time in junior high. I was about 14, 13. And I could tell I became friends with both guys, like separately. But I was like, then I remember saying, like, you could just see it. Like one was both big guys, the two biggest guys in the school, walking past each other. And it's kind of like, I wonder who would win between them. And then a couple weeks goes by in school, the first few weeks of school, and all of a sudden it's like, big fight tonight after school. They're fighting, these two guys. And it was, I remember going, as soon as I heard about it, I said, it's going to be a sellout. It's going to be a big, the soccer field was just packed with people. It was like, it was huge. Like it was everything I said it was going to be. It was a huge turnout for this fight. There was probably a couple hundred kids there. And these two guys started to fight. And the one guy was a guy that had been in the school for a while, like kind of like I was when I fought Steve, had been the champion. And the other guy was a new guy that had just come to school. He just moved to school in September that year. And he was a new guy, and nobody really knew him, and he didn't have any friends yet. I made friends with him within the first week, but he actually was kind of like a Kevin Nash, kind of like Kevin Nash against Jim Neidhart. You know, it's like, who's going to win this? And I was just a little kid, but I remember the psychology of the match, of the fight. It was like nobody knew what was going to happen. And then when we went out to watch the fight, I mean, I was ringside. And I watched this fight, and the kid that picked the fight, the Jim Neidhart guy that started the whole fight, ended up getting his ass whipped and got beat pretty bad by this other guy. And I remember watching it and going, like, the Jim Neidhart guy is going to be a babyface on Monday when we go back to school because he lost so bad. Like, and he put up a good fight, and he lost very heroically where he finally, I think the guy kicked him right in the crotch. He kicked him right in the nads, and that was it. Like, the fight's over, and you win. And I remember he gave up, and that was the end of it, and it was kind of sad. But I knew, I said, like, Monday morning, everybody's going to hate the guy that won, and they're going to love the guy that lost because they feel so bad that he lost. And that's exactly what happened. And so I remember trying to explain all this to Steve Austin at ringside. And I said, it's just the psychology of it. And perhaps if there's some young wrestlers out there, and I know there's a couple of girl wrestlers out there, that it's this, you take real life situations and use them for your psychology in wrestling. But I use that to real psychology for Steve. And that's how we started to map out the match, was that the only thing we knew going into that match is that Steve was going to lose to the sharpshooter, and that was it. That's all we had. And in those days, there was no blood. Blood was banned and not allowed because of fear of AIDS, I guess, was the talk at the time. So there was really no question. Plus, the wrestlers nobody wants to bleed. Like it's no fun cutting your head with a razor blade. It's not like, I want to do that tonight. It's like, but in this situation, it was I was going to beat Steve with the sharpshooter, and that was it. And I remember thinking about it. It was all before I got to the building. And I was like, would make this match if Steve was bleeding in the sharpshooter would make the biggest difference. And then it's like, once you got the ending, I know Mick Foley once said this about me, is that I always worked backwards. Like I'd figure out the ending and then figure out the rest of the match and then lead into the ending. But that's true. But I went back and kind of filled all the spaces of how the match could go. And that's why I always loved the match with Steve, was because, Steve was very open-minded in the sense that he was okay with, he listened to me, everything I said, and did everything I asked him to do in the match. And, I remember at the very end when we kind of mapped out the whole match, I said, you know what would really make this match? I said, is if you got a little blood. And I remember Steve thinking about that would make the match. What a visual that is, the blood, the sharpshooter pushing out. You just have to think about it and go, that's pretty intense. But, there was a big question of how much trouble you can get into. So I told Steve, I said, we'll do it, first of all, I remember Steve said to me, he goes, and I think Steve has a different account of this today, so this is how I remember it. Is I remember I asked Steve, I said, have you ever, can you use a blade? Can you do it? And he goes, I ain't never done it before, but I'll sure as hell try. And I remember I said to him, you can't practice at WrestleMania. It's too big. It's too heavy. There's too many cameras. If you don't know what you're doing, and I said, let me do it. And I remember Steve was he was hesitant. He didn't want to do it because he knew he was a rising star, and that both of us knew we could get into a lot of trouble. We both get fined for sure. Pretty good chance we'll get fined for doing it. But I remember telling him, but it'll make you. It'll make the whole thing. It's if you don't do it, I remember I told him, I said, if you don't want to do it, we won't do it. But I'm telling you that this is a time to do it. To go against the will of, Vince McMahon or whoever's running the company, to say, this needs to be done whether you like it or not, and fine me or whatever you're going to do. But this is the way to tell the story. And luckily for me, Steve agreed, which just kind of shocked me, where he's like, okay, you do it. And I've never done that before. But I'm going to give everybody a big education on cutting your head with a razor blade, but I think that cat's out of the bag anyway, isn't it? So when you make a razor blade for a wrestling match, you cut it in 4 pieces. It's one of those double-edged blades. You cut it in 4 pieces, and then you take 1/4 of it and you sort of tape it up, and then you cut it with scissors so that it's got a point. It's almost like an X-Acto blade. And you put a little tape around it, but you leave the tip open so that it's exposed so you can use it. And but you don't want too much. You don't want a big giant knife sticking out. Plus, you got to carry it in your, in the whole time you have to carry it. And a lot of people would tape a razor blade to their wrist, and they had the wrist tape, and they would tape it on your wrist, which seemed like a logical thing to do, which I did for many years, until I read an old wrestler that told me, he goes, don't tape it on your wrist. He says, carry it in your mouth. And I'm like, carry it in my mouth? Where? And he said, just stick it right up here. Stick it right in your gum. It'll sit right there, and you won't even notice it. And so I tried it one time, and it was perfect. It was way easier than trying to get it off your wrist and stuff. And I always, everything to me in wrestling was about how to make it. I wanted to make it real, so someone goes, that one was real. This match was real. And that's what I always strive for, was realism. And with Steve, I carried it in my mouth the whole match. And I remember telling him, I said, because it's a razor blade in your mouth, and it's hard to carry around in there. Like, not hard, but it's not easy. I mean, you're taking clotheslines and falls and bumps, and the last thing you want to do is swallow a razor blade. But it was like, I remember telling Steve, I said, Steve, I said, if you want to abort and cancel the whole thing, just tell me and we'll cancel it. But once I have the razor blade in my mouth, I carry it in my mouth the whole match. And when it gets time to use it, I spit it out and I got it in my hand. I have it in my fingers now. I said, once it's in my hand, I don't care what you say. You're gonna. And I told him that. I said, you're gonna be bleeding whether you like it or not. Like, but if you tell me before I spit it out, I'll abort. I'll change. We'll go with you. We'll go with if you second guess and go, I decided no, I don't want to do it, which was possible at the time because I could tell Steve was kind of nervous about, getting into trouble at that time in his career when he was on the verge of such great momentum and all that. So I understood his predicament, and I told him that. And if you ever watch the match, he's got me in a rear chin lock or something, and I think I hit him with a couple of elbows or something, and I hit the ropes, and he sidesteps me and throws me out of the ring. Well, I'm lying on the floor. You can kind of tell now if you watch the match that I spit out the razor blade and I got it in my hand, which is like it's pretty. It's a delicate job. Let me put it that way. So I got it in my hand. I remember Steve Austin jumps out on the floor, and that's when he goes to throw me into the railing, and I reverse. But as he's throwing me, Steve Austin goes, "Maybe we better not." And in those couple of seconds, I reverse, and this is all planned. Like, I know he knows I'm going to reverse him and throw him into the railing. So as we reverse, I yell in his ear. I go, "It's too late." And he fell into the railing, and I love it. Like, it's one of my crowning greatest moments of my career. Really, is Steve Austin's on his knees against the railing there. And Vince McMahon and I don't know who else were with him right on the left. Might have been Jerry Lawler doing the commentary. I can't remember now, but they're all right there. Like, they were about a foot away from me. And plus, just like you people here, the whole crowd in Chicago, the entire building on one side is all watching me. And so I step over and I grab Steve by the head, and I grab his head like this, and I grab him in a rear chin lock. And I squeeze him really tight, almost like a sleeper hold, so he couldn't move his head. And right in front of 20,000 people, with all of them watching me, I stuck him in the head with a razor blade, and I cut his head the size of your thumbnail. Like, it was just a little tiny nick in his head. Like, I would say it was excellently executed. But that was, I did it in front of Vince and everybody, and that changed the whole match. When I look at it today, I don't really know if we'd be talking about that match if there wasn't blood in it. So I know I was right. And but that match was my favorite. I always loved that spot where Steve Austin kicked me in the nads. Yeah, I remember telling him, because I thought about it. I remember thinking about it, and I said, I'll punch you in a couple of times, and then when I wind up, let me know when you're going to do it, though. Tell me, give me a sign or something that, and when you kick me, I'll sort of bend a little bit more towards you, so that when you kick in, I'll be too close. It actually happened to me at a Rod Stewart concert. Okay, I went to a Rod Stewart concert in Calgary, and I remember it was like right up. I was about 10 feet from the stage. This is a long time ago, but and I remember this girl that was at the concert that was all drunk and trying to dance and all that stuff, and I was standing behind her, and she kept bumping into me, and I kept trying to push her ahead, and she kept bumping into me, and finally she turned around and tried to claw my face. I remember she tried to claw my face, and I had a pair of glasses. I was wearing eyeglasses then. And she clawed my face, and my glasses fell off. And I remember that just kind of were hanging on one ear kind of thing. But I remember she clawed my face, and I was like, what am I supposed to do with this girl? You know, she's just, and she was drunk. And anyway, she turned around, and after I pushed her a couple more times, she tried to kick me in the crotch, kick me in the groin. Luckily for me, she was too close. So she kicked me, and her foot went all the way around and kicked me right in the ass. And I remember kind of like, whoa. She just kicked me in the ass with her. Like, and I remember thinking if she'd need me, I would have been in big trouble. But she kicked me, and she kicked me in the ass. And that's, I remember exactly what I said to Steve Austin. It's like, if you're standing too close and you kick me the right way, you kick me and you wrap your foot, you do it right, you won't kick me in the jennies. And it'll look great. It'll look better than the Ric Flair thing. I always thought that was so hokey, like it doesn't even look real. You ever see anybody in a real fight ever give a guy one of these? Like it just doesn't happen. You know, it's a figment of somebody's imagination. But that kick that Steve Austin gives me, that's beautiful. It was so good, and I remember the way I sold it, I remember going, if this happened for real, because it didn't hurt at all, but I had to tuck my equipment up a little higher than normal. But it was beautiful. I remember falling back and going, this is the greatest match in my career. It was so good, and it really was.